So let's talk about cascading style sheets for a little while. So this is my reservation.html page, which we're eventually going to cut up into a Golang template. If I look at the HTML for that page, I have all of these imports at the top. So a link to a style sheet and then a style sheet on a remote server somewhere. So if I copy that URL and open a new tab and go there, you'll see that this is really hard to read because it's not formatted nicely, but if I take the min out of there, we can actually see what it looks like. This is just CSS. So it's a bunch of directives that tell the browser how to render the page. So for example, if we look at this one, input of type equals radio, or that's just an input on a form, a radio button on a form, it tells it to use border box, whatever that is, and to put no padding around it. In the same way, text area, which is another type of input on a form, this has overflow auto and it resizes vertical. So it doesn't matter what those are. If I go back to my HTML and delete that, let's say I just cut this out of here. I'm going to cut it because I need to paste it back in a minute. I'm going to cut that, save the page, go back to my web browser and reload this page. All of that CSS is going to be gone. And here's what it looks like. It's pretty ugly. Now if I go back there and paste this back in and save it, go back and reload, it comes back. So when you take that CSS out, it actually removes all of Bootstrap's formatting and just tries to render the page as best as it can. So we wind up having a bunch of things like in our form. If I go down here and look at the form we're building, which is somewhere in here. Here. When I have this class form control, that's what makes this look so nice. Actually, no, this is the one that I'm creating dynamically. So let's find the actual form here. There it is, right here. If I take this out, class equals form control, I'll cut that, save it, and go back and reload this page, this one should change. And it does, okay? And if I put it back and save and reload, it looks the way that it's supposed to. So what I'm doing is just telling my web browser how to render the elements on the page, how to style them. And I have a fair bit of control over that sort of thing. So right now, we have these things that we've added. We've put it right into the page. These ones are loaded off of a remote server. These ones are embedded into my page. Now, to clean things up, because this gets kind of ugly and it takes up a lot of space in the file, I can actually create my own file. So I'm going to, over here on the left-hand side where it shows all the things, I have this static folder. And inside of that, all I have is an image, a folder with images in it. And I'm going to create another folder, directory, and I'll call it CSS for style. And inside of that, I'll create a new file, which I'll call styles.css. And yes, I'll add it to Git. Then I'm going to go back to my reservation page, and I'm going to cut this stuff out of here. Not the style tags. I don't want those. In fact, I'm going to delete those. And then I'll go back to the file I just created, styles.cs, and just paste in my directives. Save those. And now I'll go back to my reservation page, and just like I'm loading things remotely, so I'm going to unpackage.com and loading Node CSS, I can actually load local stuff as well. So link rel equals style sheet, which tells it what we're linking to. Type is text CSS, so text, and it's cascading style sheet. And the href, in this case, I'm just going to go to my folder, static, and inside of that, I have a folder called CSS, and inside of that, I have a folder called styles.css, which I better type right or it won't work. And I can save it. So if I come back here now and reload this page, nothing should change, and it doesn't. But when I view the source, now I'm referring to that styles.css, and that makes things much cleaner. And the great thing about that, it means that I don't have to, on every one of these pages, like about, I have a styles here, I can delete that, because I don't need it anymore. And I can just paste in the same link that I have here. Copy. Paste. And I probably want all of these things, so I may as well just copy them all. Eventually, they're going to go into a layout template in CSS, but we'll copy them right now. It's not going to hurt to do it. So I'll put this and replace all of this with what I have in there. Do the same thing for the contact page, so I can get rid of all of this and paste in what I have in there. Same thing for generals. Go to the top there, replace all of this with my imports. My index page, replace all of this with my imports, and finally the majors page. Now you can see, hopefully, why it's so convenient to have a layout in Golang templates, like we looked at a few lectures ago. I don't have to make changes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 files. I just make it in one layout. But we'll get to that when we cut this up. So now that I have these styles, so let's look at these for a second. Let's go back to the reservation page. That's the one we're working on. And I'm going to look at the page, and I have this. This is some text. I want to change the styling just for that. So let's find that. This is some text, and it already has an ID. Well, that's great. But actually, I'm actually not going to use the ID to make this change. I'm going to, at the very top of this page, redefine the style. So I'll put in a style again for paragraph tags. So I can actually change HTML elements like this. And I can say color red. And if I save that and reload this page, this is a paragraph, so it should change to red. And it did. And then if underneath that, if I create exactly the same thing, but make color green, what's going to happen? Well, what I'm telling it here, first of all, I'm saying every time you see a paragraph tag, make the text red. And then immediately after that, I'm saying every time you see a paragraph tag, make the color green. Well, what's going to happen? If I reload this, save, reservation.html, if I reload this, it's now green. And that's because I have overridden the style. And the order that cascading style sheet directives appear in actually matters. So this one says, yeah, make it red, but then immediately after it, I override that style. Now, overriding styles is incredibly helpful. For example, I'm going to delete this because I don't want it right now. The order matters. The most recent directive, the last directive you give, will always be the one that takes place. Now up here on this line, I've imported Bootstrap's styling, which means if I do the import here and then after it, I override those directives. So we have a button here, for example, called Click Me, and let's find out what that class is. Button primary. Well, let's try changing its styles. So first of all, I'm going to do it manually right in the browser. I'm going to right click on this button and choose Inspect Element, which is here somewhere. There it is. And that shows me in my inspector, here's my button, and down here it tells me what its directives are. So this element, button not disabled, button not load secondary. This has a color. Now if I take that and change the color to green with no hash mark, because it's just a directive green, it changed it to green. The click me is actually green. If I change it to red and hit return, now it's red. That means I can override this style. So what I can do, just to make things really easy, is say, copy this style. So I'll copy everything that I see in here. And I can do that probably just by right-clicking on it. Yes, copy rule. Right-click on it and choose copy rule. Go back to my HTML, which is right here. And in my style tags, I'm going to override Bootstrap's default formatting. So red, I'll just take that out entirely, okay? So because I've taken that out entirely, it's the only thing I'm overriding is the border color. So if I save this and go back and reload the page, this should look exactly like Bootstrap's default styling, and it does. Now, if I say, well, let's change the color, and we'll choose, we'll just choose one of these. So we'll choose whatever that color is, kind of a blue, I think, kind of a slate blue. And go back and reload the page, it changes the color. Hard to see that one. Let's make one that's a little easier to see. So I'll change the color to, and I'll let my browser choose something that's easier to spot, aqua. So I'll choose that, save, reload, and now it's aqua. So that's one thing you can do, and it's really convenient. If you don't like Bootstrap's default CSS, for example, I can actually change the CSS. Now there's other ways of addressing things. So far we've looked at a direct class. We've looked at a direct tag like P, so one of the built-in HTML tags. We can actually do it other ways. So the syntax, if I want to refer to every HTML element of a particular name, I can use P to get paragraph tags. Or I could go div to get all divs, okay? So that's how you refer to HTML elements. If I want to refer to all elements of a particular class, this is the syntax I use. I put a dot in front of the class name. So let's try that. Let's come down here and find our paragraph, wherever it is, and we'll duplicate that a few times. And we'll get rid, actually, let's not duplicate the ID. Duplicate it once, get rid of the ID, and instead put class equals, and I'll leave that empty for right now, and I'll duplicate it 3 times. So I have 3 paragraphs. And I'll give the first one a class of para class, and I'll leave the other 2 empty. Okay? So if I come here, right now, there is no class para class, so it just puts in some paragraphs and says, well, I can't find a class with any instructions, so I'm just going to ignore that declaration. But if I come back up here, and I called my class para class, I think. Where is it? There it is, yeah. I now want to give some directives to that class. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to say dot para class, and I'll give it some directives. So let's change the font size. Font size, and that can be a number, like 10 points, or 25 pixels, or 3 M's. Let's leave 3 M's. So what it's going to do for any time it sees the class para class, it will change the font size to the same size as 3 capital letter M's, as in Mary. So I reload this, and it should affect just 1 paragraph. And it does. But if I add that class to another paragraph, like right here, para class, and reload the page, now it affects 2. So you can affect multiple things by referring to a single class name. And I can also put 2 classes in there. So I'll call it second class. So now this paragraph, the one right after the first one with the ID, has 2 classes. So let's define some rules for the second class, which I will call, because I want to go by class name, starts with the dot, second class, and we'll say color red. So now, if I look at my formatting directives here, I have a paragraph with an ID, so it just goes to default paragraph because I've done nothing with that class. In the second one, I've said, give it the class of para class and the class of second class, and the one after it just has the class of para class. So what do you think is going to happen? Well, let's find out. Reload the page, and this one, because it has 2 classes, para class and second class, applies all of the styling for both of those classes to this text. This one just has para class, so it actually only gives the rules that are found in para class. Now the third way to refer to things is by ID. So I can say ID for this last paragraph is last para. Now to refer to things by ID, you use a different syntax. So here, because I'm going by ID, I start with the hash mark, and I call this one last para. And now I can give some directives in there. So I can say, well, let's say text decoration. There's another one. And the text decoration is going to be underlined. So I'm referring to one element. And because this is an ID, there should be one and only one element in the entire HTML with that ID. But I've told it, whenever you see the element with the ID of last page, give it an underline. So let's do that. And there it does. It gives it an underlining. So that is how CSS works. And for our purposes right now, that is sufficient. So all I need to be able to do at this moment is to refer to things by class, by HTML tag, or by ID. And as we go through the course of the lectures, we'll actually have a little more control or show you how you can do things in a little more interesting ways. But for right now, I just want to be able to refer to things and make sure that you have an understanding of how to select things by HTML tag, by ID, or by class, and to understand that in cascading style sheets, the most recent directive, the last one you give your page, that's the one that will have effect, which allows us to override things like Bootstrap's default styling. In the same way, Noti has a little thing that shows up at the top. I can actually control how that looks as well. And I can control Sweet Alert. Pretty much anything that you display on a page, you have some control over the styling. All right, that's it for CSS for the moment. We'll be seeing that more regularly as we progress through the remainder of the course.